Hi, our chapter today is called The Monkeys and the Bees. So I had a look in my box of puppets and I haven't got monkeys. I think if they're still in one piece, they're sitting on the couch back in our classroom at school. So I've put some little monkey like critters up in the tree. Okay, let's go. Jungles, Fred found, were full of corners and crannies. They held secrets. But the secrets emerged in the most unexpected ways. They would never, he thought, have found the scrap of paper that changed everything if it hadn't been for the joint efforts of the monkeys and the ants and the bees. Max saw them first, later that afternoon. He had been lying on his back staring at the sky while Lila and Con and Fred sat by the fire and tried to make a plan. The problem was that despite being told very firmly to stay put, Max kept trying to explore, and he was a small 5-year-old in a very large jungle. How sure are you, Lila asked Fred, that the raft will hold? Fred considered. The raft was wide and strong, and the vines wrapped so thickly to secure it that the raft was more green than brown. It looked like a square of floating field, but, he thought, the pilot had presumably been just as certain about the plane. Medium sure, he saw Con's face. High medium. And walking would take weeks, he said. We know Manus is on the Amazon, so if we sail downriver, we should reach it. Max approached and sat on Lila's feet, tugging at her sock. Lila! He dug a chunk of snot from his nose and wiped it on the grass. Except we don't know if Manus is upriver or downriver from here, said Con, so we have a 50% chance of death. Lila, said Max, listen to me. But there's a 50% chance of life, said Fred. Con smirked. He resisted the urge to flick Max's snot at her. Can you hear yourself, she said. Do you know how insane that sounds? Lila. Max tugged harder at her sock. Lila, did you see? Did you see how the monkeys fought the bees? What do you mean? Asked Lila. Becca had taken up a position draped across one of Lila's shoulders, back legs hooked under her armpit. He looked, Fred thought, like the epaulets on his father's old army uniform. Epaulets are those little flaps of fabric that go across the shoulder like that, like a little strap, and usually has a little button on it. That's what an epaulet is. The monkeys won, said Max. I followed them. Max, what are you talking about? Lila picked him up and held his face close to hers, blazingly angry. I thought you were in the den. You know you're not allowed to move. I told you. If I can't trust you, I'm going to tie you to me. Max shouted. I didn't go far. I stayed away because I don't like bees. Maxie, don't lie. There are no bees, said Lila. I've seen every flying thing, ants and beetles and mosquitoes, but no bees. It was over there, said Max. He pointed to the other side of the clearing, among tall rubber trees, in the high bits. Lila raised her eyebrows over Max's head. Was this a dream, Max, or in real life? Real life, said Max. I don't believe you. Real life. Max looked furious. Real life. The monkeys washed their hands in the ants and then they fought the bees. I have no idea what you're trying to describe, said Con, but it sounds terrifying. Max got up, roared and stamped. He stepped on Con's knuckles. Con gave a yell and slapped at his ankles. That hurt, he said. Don't hit him, said Lila. You're not paying attention, any of you, said Max. Listen. Fred looked at Max. The boy's eyes were unhappy and a little wild. We are listening, Max, he said. No, come. Max took hold of Con's hand and pulled her up and into the trees, his small feet thumping determinedly in the earth. Con looked surprised, but let herself be led, jogging beside him. She didn't comment on the state of Max's hand, which was sticky with unknown substances. Fred and Lila ran after them. There, said Max. They were there. He pointed up at an ant's nest, a great bulbous structure built on the tree's trunk, bulging out of it like a pot-belly. There were no monkeys in sight. They were here really soon ago, said Max. They'll come back. Skeptically, Fred sat down. Max sat on Lila's legs. Backer clung to Lila's shirt. Do you all remember who Backer is? Backer is the little sloth that they found. Sitting still and empty-handed was not, Fred found, an easy thing to do. The things he was trying so hard not to think about, his father's face, his mother's voice, came crowding in, and darker things, all four of them starving, unfound in the green clearing, crept towards him. He tried to whistle, but his head swam, and he could only make a peculiar piping noise. Fred, whispered Lila, you'll scare the monkeys. And then suddenly the monkeys came. There were three of them, dark brown, strong-limbed and sweet-faced. Fred watched in awe as they chased one another up and down the trees, chittering. They whirly-jigged around the trees, flicking their tails, and then the largest of the monkeys, a mother with a baby hanging from her neck, laid her paws on the ants' nest. The ants swarmed over the monkey's paws and up their arms until her fur was black with them. Then, fast, before the ants could bite, the monkey rubbed her paws together. Con touched Fred's sleeve. Is she killing the ants? Fred watched the monkey lower her nose to her paws and sniff deeply. Is it like a perfume or a sort of drug? He asked. Suddenly, all three monkeys, as if at a signal, turned and leapt away across the trees. Let's follow them, said Lila. It is not easy to keep pace with monkeys if you don't happen to be one yourself, and if you haven't eaten properly for days. They were all four weak, and Lila's hands were shaking. Con turned pale as they jogged after the monkeys' disappearing backs. The monkeys leapt into the branches of the spreading rubber trees and halted. Bees, said Max in a profoundly self-satisfied voice. I told you so. Far above their heads, so far it was blurred with distance, was a bee's hive. It was enormous, encased in a grey layer of resin, and the buzzing was astonishingly loud. Honey ran down the side of the tree. Lila's eyes widened. She held Backer more tightly. They don't attack sloths, do they? As they watched, the mother monkey approached the hive, broke open the protective layer, and plunged her paws into the depths. She broke off a piece of honeycomb and bit into it, dripping honey onto her baby's head. The bees swarmed furiously but didn't go close enough to sting. Lila's eyes were as wide as the sun. I think the smell on her paws meant that the bees didn't attack, she said. It must be a repellent. Let's try it, said Fred, already on his feet. But what if it only works for monkeys, said Con. Well, there's only one way to find out. He thought of dinner, which would be pineapples, if there were any left, and cocoa grubs, if there weren't. Wouldn't you like some honey? Just think for a minute before you. But Fred was already running. He found his way back to the ants' nest and waited, panting for the others to catch up. Then he laid his hands on its side. The ants swarmed onto his fingers and knuckles and wrists. It was like wearing a pair of black gloves. They tickle, he said. Now rub your hands, ordered Max. Quickly, like the monkeys. A few of the ants swarmed up Fred's arms all the way to his chin, but they didn't seem disposed to bite. He rubbed his hands together, feeling a little guilty, and then sniffed. The smell was so strong that he gagged. You know when they put stuff on cuts at school, he said. It's like that. Disinfectant, said Lila. He rubbed his hands over his face as he'd seen the monkey do, and up his arms. He gathered more ants and rubbed the smell onto his legs and ankles too, just in case. Con pulled his hand down to her face so she could smell. It smells like ammonia, she said, like my aunt's smelling salts. They ran back to the honey tree. Fred thought the others seemed to be giving him a wider berth than usual. You smell like a bad idea, said Max, like medicine. At the foot of the tree, Fred looked up. The trunk was enormous. The bees were a distant cloud. Are you sure you don't want to stop to think for just one single second? To at least make a plan, asked Con. I'll be fine, said Fred. He had always loved climbing trees, the feeling of navigating an unknown land upward. The others watched him, Lila with expectant eyes, Con with one eyebrow and her upper lip raised, Max with his finger in his nose. He seized a low branch and heaved himself up. Max cheered. Fred's legs scrabbled for purchase and then found a knot in the bark and pushed upward. He felt immediately that this was different. This was nothing like climbing at home. His muscles were weak and less at his command. His arms and legs were bruised and had less pull and spring to them. It occurred to him with a jolt that he hadn't checked to see if the tree's wood was rotten. The tree creaked under him, loud as the hinge on a giant's gate. Damn, he whispered very quietly. He reached up for the next branch, and then the next, his shoes slipping and sliding on the smoothness of the bark. Oh, for goodness sake, he heard Con say, he's going to get himself killed. He'll be all right, said Lila. Really? What if he's not, though? It'll be even harder, stuck in this place with just the three of us. Fred, she called, please, just come down. Fred ignored her. He swung higher and faster. He set both feet on a thick branch and looked above his head for a good handhold. Suddenly the branch under his feet snapped and his legs flailed in the air, kicking against the trunk of the tree. He swung from his hands, feeling his fingers slip against the slick surface. He scrabbled with his right hand for another branch, his legs blindly seeking a foothold. His feet met solid wood again. He tried to pull up to the next handhold, but his arms felt hollow, no more use than wool and straw. He stood on the branch, clutching the wood above his head, frozen. He tried not to think of what his father's face would look like if he heard his son had died climbing a tree. Look at him, said Con below. He's stuck. Are you all right? Called Lila. He's obviously not, said Con. I'm not going to stand here and watch him die. She stomped to the base of the tree, her shoulders hunched around her ears, and began to haul herself up, her jaw locked like a boxer's. She moved swiftly but steadily, despite the shaking in her hands and knees. Fred watched as she came to rest a few branches below him, staring up, hugging the tree trunk to her chest. Her ankles were wobbling with fear. What are you doing? He asked through gritted teeth. Telling you to come down. No, said Fred, I'm going up. Then I'm coming too. Why? You look stuck. I'm not, but it wasn't true, he knew. He had no feeling in his arms. He looked down at Con. Her face was bloodless, so white it was almost blue, but etched with determination. Flushing, he tried to arrange his expression into easy curiosity. Even if I were, how would you be able to help me? I'll go ahead, she said, and test the branches. If you have another scare like that, I bet you just fall and die. I wasn't scared, said Fred. The words were out of his mouth before he could stop them. Yes, you were, said Con, facing up the tree, and so am I, so there. She moved ahead. She went infinitely more slowly than he would have, and her face was set with an expression that looked like fury. But she climbed steadily, testing each branch with her feet and wiping her hands on her skirt at every move. Fred unpeeled one hand from the branch. He pushed back at the angry opera of fear. He followed Con. Gradually, as Fred climbed, the sway and rhythm of it took over and his breath returned to normal. The hive came into sight. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands of buzzing insects. Bees don't have encouraging faces, do they? Said Con. Her voice was much higher than usual. Do it quickly so we can go down. Just a second. Fred crouched on the branch, his legs shaking a little, and stuffed leaves into his nostrils so the bees couldn't sting up his nose. Don't come too close or you'll get stung. From far down below he heard Lila call encouragingly, You can do it! Max unencouragingly shouted, But also, if you both fall, would you be angry if we ate you? Fred stood, wrapping one arm around a thick branch to the right of him. With the other he reached up and left, out over the vast drop, and pushed his hand into the fist hole size in the bee's nest that the monkeys had made. The buzzing grew louder and more furious. Fred braced himself. The bees swarmed angrily around him, and a few rebounded off his shorts, but not a single bee touched his skin. Triumphantly, Fred broke off a fistful of honeycomb and then another. It works, Fred said. A bee buzzed into his mouth. He swore and spat it out, jerking his head, and felt the tree sway under him. Where do we put it? Asked Con. She looked around as if expecting a glass jar to be balanced in the crook of a branch. We could drop the chunks of honeycomb down to Lila, Fred said, but they might get stuck in the branches. If all this was for nothing, Con began. No, I've got an idea. He braced himself and looped one arm around a branch. With his free hand, he tucked his shirt into his shorts, then dropped the honey inside his shirt front. He licked his fingers. Oh, can you imagine what that would feel like with a great big lump of sticky honey down on your tummy? Ah, he said. He had forgotten that they were covered in dust from the bark and the remnants of the ants. But even so, the honey was spectacular. It made his skin buzz. Can I have some? Said Con. I thought you wanted to get down. She was shaking so hard her knees were jumping, but she lifted her chin defiantly. If you can, I can. It was as Fred edged around the great round trunk of the tree toward her that he saw it, something red, the size of an apple, tied tightly with vines to the branch. His breath stopped. He leaned backward to see better. Fred, screamed Con, don't! I'm fine. He grabbed a handful of tree branch. Look above your head. The red thing was not a plant. It did not have the tinge of life to it. What is it? She squinted upward. The leaves are in the way. I think it's leather. Like a handbag? No, something else. He edged around her and upward. He unwound the thing from the tree as quickly as he could, his hands shaking. The branch he was on was broad, and he sat down on it, his legs hanging down on either side. Con approached and sat, hugging the trunk with one shaking arm, facing him. Don't open it now, she said. Wait until we're on the ground, you idiot. Just quickly, said Fred. It was a red leather pouch with a leather drawstring and the remnants of gold embossed writing on the base. It was heavy. His hands were shaking as he opened it and pulled out a lump of metal. A tobacco tin, he said. It was rusty, but less rusty than the sardine tin. Let me see, said Con. There were words on the side. She whispered them aloud as if they were a spell. Collier's finest tobacco, London, Piccadilly. There's something else, he said. The tree rocked suddenly in the wind, and the thing slipped through his fingers. He caught it just in time. It was also rusty and rough in his fingers. A penknife, he said. Is that everything? I think so. He brushed away a stray bee and upturned the pouch over his palm. A piece of paper fell out. What's that? Said Con. A letter? It was a sheet of paper from the blank end pages of a book, marked in ink and labelled with neat block capitals. In the corner there was a sketch of the points of a compass. It's a map, he said. Goosebumps rose on his arms. Fred knew the power of maps. They gestured to hidden things. They were line drawings of the world's secrets. He studied it. It was sketched in ink which had faded in the creases of the paper. There were thin lines for tributaries and a thick one for what he assumed must be the Amazon. In the far right-hand corner there was an X. It had been scratched so fiercely the pen had pierced the paper. What do you think it's of? What's the X stand for? Con's eyes were wide. She seemed to have forgotten that they were 50 feet up in the sky hanging onto a tree. I don't know. Fred looked upward. The tree they sat in was taller than the others that surrounded it. Near the top, where it thinned to a spike, it stood high above most of the rest of the canopy. I'm going further up, he said. If I can get above the canopy, I might be able to see. No, you're not. That would be insane. You're just showing off because you're embarrassed you got scared before. Fred felt his ears go red. I'm going. Do you want to go back down or come up with me? Con pulled down the corners of her mouth. I'm coming too, obviously. They went slowly, testing each branch as the branches got thinner and thinner. The branches became springy and fork-handle thin. Suddenly, Fred broke out from under a leafy branch and he found himself head and shoulders above the canopy. Below him, the river stretched purple and silver. Fred tried to keep his breathing steady. It was exactly as he dreamed of it. From his seat on the floor in a corner of the library. Look, he said. I am looking, said Con. She was just below him. Her eyes were screwed shut. The river wound for miles around bends and swoops, disappearing into the horizon near the foot of a mountain. As he watched, a monkey skittered down from a tree and leapt away. curling its tail around branches as it swung past him. Open your eyes, Con, said Fred. You have to see. Con opened her eyes and then opened them further, as wide as the sky. I didn't know it would be like this. It's beautiful. It looked, Fred thought, like someone had designed it with a purpose in mind, someone who wanted the world to be as wild and green and as alive as possible. Very slowly, Fred let go of the tree with one hand. Fear rose in his mouth, but he reached into his pocket. He unfolded the paper. It felt like a small green miracle. The map matched exactly what he saw. It might also have been drawn from precisely this position or one very close. He peered down at the map. That's us, he whispered. And that bend, that's the place where we moored, said Con. There were ink curves, intricately sketched, that matched exactly, or almost exactly, the world below them. Where's the X? Asked Con. Fred shielded his eyes. That way, but I can't see anything. The horizon was a green smudge. He could not see where the river wound. We should mark where we are on the map, said Con. You are here. Fred looked down at his hands. The cuts on his knuckles from the crash were just beginning to heal. He bit the scab off one of them, squeezed out a drop of blood, and put a spot of red to mark where they were. That's disgusting, said Con. Good idea. Fred grinned. Let's go down, he said. There's honey for lunch. He swung down from the tree faster than he should have. A lot of skin got left on a knot of bark halfway down, and he got poked in the eye by a branch. Con followed more slowly, whispering instructions to herself. Honey was seeping through his shirt as he thumped the last 2 feet to the forest floor, but his heart was bounding. You're alive, said Max. He threw his arms around Fred's legs and tried to bite his knee in celebration. We were just thinking we were going to get to eat you, said Max. Try not to sound so disappointed, said Fred, grinning. Con reached the lowest branch of the tree. She hesitated, readying for the jump. Lila held out a hand, but Con ignored it and thumped to the forest floor. We made a discovery, she said grandly. Really? What is it? Food? Asked Lila. Wait and see. Let's go to the clearing first, said Con. Then, as if a valve had been released inside her, she let out a cough that was half laughter, half triumph. I've never actually climbed a tree before. Never, said Lila. Then that was actually quite amazing. I know, said Con. I think so too. As soon as they reached the den, Fred pulled off his shirt and scraped off the honey onto wide leaves. He crossed to the pool and splashed water on his chest and shirt. Bark and dust had stuck to the honey and made a surprisingly tenacious paste. Hurry up, Fred, called Max. Fred gave up and pulled his sticky shirt on again. He ran back to the den. Lila was turning the tobacco pouch over with careful hands. Tobacco was hanging around her throat like a necklace, sniffing her collarbone. It's red, said Lila. Tobacco pouches are usually brown. So? Asked Con. Lila leant forward, her eyes shining. Bees can't see the colour red. They see it as black. What if someone wanted the bees to protect the pouch from other animals? The bees can't see it's not just part of the tree, so they wouldn't have been suspicious. Do bees feel suspicious? Said Con sceptically. Lila flushed. It's just an idea, but Mama says in the jungle you should avoid red. It's a poison colour. Whoever owned this would have counted on that. They must have been planning to come back for it. Fred felt an electric shiver pass over his skin. There's more. Keep looking. A map. Lila unfolded the paper on a wide, flat stone. What's the X? We couldn't see, said Con. It was too far. Maybe treasure, said Lila. Maybe a secret tribe. Cannonballs, said Max. Don't, said Con. Or maybe he didn't know what it was. Maybe it's just where he was going, said Fred. I wonder if he knew. Max laid one small hand over Fred's mouth. I'm hungry. Are we going to eat the honey? Honey worked on them like medicine. Lila sat up straighter. Colour came into Con's cheeks. The taste of the honey was absolutely astonishing. Sweet and earthy and wild. It made Fred want to turn backflips across the jungle floor. It was a taste rich enough and deep enough to make them forget just for half an hour about the map. Oh, this is getting really exciting. Someone's obviously been there before them. Okay, I will read another chapter tomorrow.